Admiral Kang stood rigid as the Galactic Concorde ships descended through Earth's atmosphere. The massive vessels blocked out the sun, casting long shadows over the Seoul Emergency Meeting Center. Behind him, General Park fidgeted with her collar. Eyes narrowed at the approaching vessels. "They've ignored our transmissions for centuries," Kang muttered. "Now they arrive unannounced." The world's military leaders had gathered within hours of the first sightings. 12 ships, each larger than an aircraft carrier, had taken position over major cities worldwide. No weapons fired yet, but the message was clear. General Park checked her tablet. "The Americans want to launch missiles. The Chinese are holding back. Europe is divided." "And what does South Korea suggest?" Kang asked, though he already knew the answer. "We wait, we listen, then we decide." Outside, crowds gathered, despite evacuation orders. Some carried signs welcoming the visitors, others held religious texts. Most simply stared upward, phones recording the moment when humanity confirmed it was not alone. The largest ship hovered directly above them. Its hull shimmered with blues and purples that seemed to move like ocean waves. No visible weapons, but Kang wasn't fooled. Anyone who could cross stars didn't need obvious guns. "Movement," Park whispered. The lead ship's underside split open. A ramp of shimmering light extended downward, touching the landing pad where Earth's representatives waited. 3 figures descended slowly. Kang had expected many things: small green men, tentacled monsters, robot emissaries. Instead, the aliens appeared almost human, if humans grew to 8 feet tall with skin that rippled with color like oil on water. The center figure stepped forward. Ambassador Lee, as they would later learn to call him, was tall and slender, with iridescent skin that shifted between blue and violet. His eyes, 4 of them, blinked independently as he surveyed the crowd. No mouth moved, but words filled the air, somehow translated into every listener's native language. "People of Earth," the voice echoed around them. "The Concorde requires your service. The Void Dominion threatens all sentient life." The world leaders exchanged glances. The American president began to speak, but his words died as the Russian leader interrupted. The Chinese premier tried next. Arguments broke out among the gathered officials, each wanting to represent humanity. Captain Han Jiwoo wasn't supposed to speak. As military attaché, her job was to observe and report back. But when the world's supposed leaders devolved into bickering, she stepped forward. "Why should we fight your war?" she asked simply. The ambassador's colors darkened to deep purple. He lifted a hand and a hologram appeared in the air between them. The moon, Earth's moon, appeared in perfect detail. "Lunar base," someone whispered. The secret international outpost, officially denied by all governments, appeared in the projection. The image shifted. Dark ships, nothing like the Concorde vessels, appeared at the moon's edge. A flash of light. Then lunar base disintegrated under alien weapons fire. The room fell silent. The date stamp showed this had happened 3 hours ago. No one on Earth had even known. "Because you no longer have a choice," Ambassador Lee replied. Captain Han stepped closer to the hologram. "That was unprovoked." "The Void Dominion does not provoke. It consumes, it assimilates. Your moon base was merely in its path." The ambassador's colors shifted to a softer blue. "We have watched your kind for centuries. You fight amongst yourselves over trivial differences, yet you also show remarkable adaptability." The president found his voice. "You expect us to send our people to die in space?" "We expect you to survive," Lee replied. "The Dominion will reach your atmosphere within 30 days. Without Concorde technology, you will be extinct within 35. General Park moved to Captain Han's side. "And with your help, you will still die, but some will live, and your species may continue." The ambassador's colors pulsed. "We offer evacuation for 10% of your population. The rest will fight." Outrage erupted around them. The Chinese premier demanded equal treatment. The Russian leader threatened nuclear response. The American president began negotiations for a higher percentage. Captain Han watched the ambassador's colors. They didn't change. During the human outbursts, these aliens had expected this reaction, had planned for it. "You knew we would refuse these terms," she said quietly. For the first time, the ambassador's colors rippled with something like surprise. Yet you must accept them. The void approaches. We have ships for warriors, not civilians. Admiral Kang stepped forward. Then warriors you shall have, but not on your terms alone. The ambassador considered this. You have 3 Earth days to present your counteroffer. The void will not wait longer. As the aliens retreated back up their light bridge, Captain Han looked to the sky. She couldn't see the enemy ships yet, but they were coming. Humanity had just been drafted into a war they didn't understand, against an enemy they couldn't comprehend. The world would change today. Whether humanity would survive to see tomorrow remained to be seen. Captain Han crouched behind the wreckage of a Concorde transport, plasma fire sizzling overhead. The metal twisted into unnatural shapes, still glowed red-hot in places. The air smelled of burnt plastic and the metallic tang of alien blood. Her squad, the remnants of it, huddled nearby. 3 months in, and human casualties approached 40%. She peeked over the edge. The enemy, those shadow-like creatures that made up the Void Dominion, moved in perfect formation. Their bodies seemed to absorb light rather than reflect. Where Concorde aliens shimmered with color, the Void troops were absence of color. Black holes in the shape of soldiers. "Status," Han whispered, ducking back down as a plasma bolt seared the air where her head had been. Lieutenant Kim looked up from where he knelt beside their wounded. Private Choi took a hit to the leg. "Min and Day are low on ammo. The rest of us are okay, but we can't stay here." Kim's face was streaked with dirt and blood, some his, some belonging to the 2 soldiers they'd lost in the initial ambush. He pressed a med pack against Private Choi's leg, the young soldier biting down on a strap to keep from screaming as the medicine burned into her wound. "This is suicide," Lieutenant Kim hissed, sealing the med pack. "Their battle algorithms don't account for terrain adaptation. The Concorde sent us straight into a kill zone." Han nodded grimly. "They don't understand fighting without perfect information. The Concorde generals plan like they're playing chess, but the Void changes the board." She pulled out her tactical display, but the screen was cracked and useless. The Concorde relied too much on technology. When it failed, their soldiers froze, waiting for new orders that would never come. "We need to reach that ridge," Han said, pointing to high ground 2 kilometers east. "It's our rendezvous point." Kim shook his head. 3 open killing fields between here and there. The Void has every approach covered." A shadow fell over them. Han's hand went to her weapon before she recognized the tall, angular form of a Concorde officer. Commander Sung had become separated from his unit during the ambush and now crouched awkwardly beside them, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence. Sung had been their liaison for the past month, one of the few Concorde officers who bothered to learn human names. Now he watched with fascination as Han quickly sketched alternative routes in the dirt with her combat knife. "Here," she said, pointing to a narrow ravine. "We can follow this until we reach this outcropping, then go through the abandoned mining complex." "Impossible," Sung protested, his skin flashing concerned purple. "The Dominion has calculated all logical approaches. Their predictive algorithms have mapped every efficient route." "Then we'll be illogical," Han replied, wiping away her dirt. Map with a sweep of her hand. She signaled her team forward. "We're not taking the ravine, but you just said—" Sung began. "I said it loudly enough for their forward scouts to hear," Han whispered, nodding toward the ridge where shadow movement betrayed Void positions. "They've already repositioned to intercept us there." Understanding dawned slowly on Sung's alien features. "Deception. Humans call it a feint," Han said. "We're actually going through the toxic marsh." Kim's eyes widened. "Captain, our filters won't last more than 20 minutes in those gases." "The crossing takes 15 if we run," Han replied. "The Void won't expect it because it's a terrible idea. That's exactly why it might work." She looked each squad member in the eye. "Anyone who wants to try the ravine can go that way. I won't order you through the marsh." No one moved. "We're with you, Captain," Kim said simply. Han helped Private Choi to her feet. The soldier grimaced but stood steady. "I can make it, ma'am." They moved out in staggered formation, Han in the lead with Sung awkwardly bringing up the rear. His long limbs weren't built for human combat. Movements. The marsh gases rose in sickly green clouds around them as they splashed through knee-deep muck. Their face filters hissed with the strain of processing the toxic air. By the time they reached the far side, Han's lungs burned and her vision blurred, but plasma fire hadn't followed them. They reached the ridge just as their rendezvous window closed. The Concorde commander there stared in disbelief as they emerged, from a direction no battle plan had accounted for. Later, safely behind Allied lines, Sung studied Han as medics treated her squad. His skin had shifted to a thoughtful blue tone. "How did you know that would work?" he asked. "The toxic route had a 78% fatality projection." "I didn't," Han admitted, accepting a canteen of water. "Sometimes not knowing is our advantage." "I don't understand," Sung said. Han took a long drink before answering. "The Void relies on prediction. They catalogue every logical choice. But humans—" She smiled despite her exhaustion. "Humans are really good at making illogical choices when our backs are against the wall." Sung's color rippled with what might have been respect. The Concorde has never considered unpredictability as a tactical advantage. "Maybe that's why you're losing this war," Han said quietly. "And why you needed us." "This stops now," Han declared, to the assembled human officers in the makeshift bunker. Her voice echoed off the metal walls of what had once been a Concorde storage facility. Now it served as the unofficial headquarters for the human division leaders who had survived 6 months of brutal warfare. 20 officers sat or stood around the central table, all that remained of the original 80 who had led the first human battalions into space. The rest were dead, their bodies floating in the void or buried on strange planets. Han looked at their tired faces, seeing the same anger and determination she felt herself. "We've lost 63% of our forces, following Concorde battle plans," she continued, pulling up casualty figures on the main display. "Meanwhile, Concorde losses remain under 15%. They're keeping their troops back while we die on the front lines." Major Yoon, her face bearing a fresh scar from orbital shrapnel, nodded in agreement. "They position us as shock troops. Cannon fodder." She pointed to the battle maps. "Look at the pattern, humans first always." Around the room, heads nodded. They had noticed the same thing. Captain Bayek, once a technology professor before the draft, distributed tactical revisions on handheld devices. "I've analyzed our successful operations," he said. "Every single victory came when we ignored Concorde protocols and improvised." Han touched her screen, bringing up the success rates. "Our units survive 3 times more often when we adapt to conditions rather than stick to their rigid plans." "The Concorde sees us as expendable," Yoon said, standing to address her peers. "But they're missing what makes us effective. Humans don't fight like machines. We don't need perfect information. We make intuitive leaps." "What are you suggesting?" asked Colonel Shin, the oldest among them. "Outright rebellion? They control our ships, our supplies, our air." Han shook her head. "Not rebellion. A tactical reorganization. From now on, human. Units operate semi-independently. We'll fulfill mission objectives our way." "They'll never allow it," Shin argued. "They won't know until it's working," Han replied. "By then, it will be too late to stop us." The bunker door slid open with a hydraulic hiss. Commander Sung entered unexpectedly, causing hands to move toward weapons. The tall Concorde officer had been their liaison for months, but trust remained thin between species. Sung's skin rippled with what the humans had learned to read as concern, deep blues and purples swirling across his iridescent surface. 4. Eyes blinked rapidly, scanning the room. "This gathering is unauthorized," he stated flatly. His translator produced perfect Korean but couldn't quite capture emotion. Han stood her ground. "We're discussing ways to improve our combat effectiveness. The Council monitors all human communications," Sung said, moving further into the room. "They are concerned about your improvisations. They're discussing termination protocols." The room went silent. Captain Beck was the first to find his voice. "For the mission?" Beck asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "For human involvement," Sung clarified quietly. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. "Not just for the soldiers, but potentially for Earth itself. Without Concorde protection, the Void would consume their homeworld in weeks." Han stepped forward, close enough to see the subtle patterns flowing beneath Sung's outer skin. "Then help us. Your people brought us into this fight. We intend to finish our way." Sung's colors shifted to a shade they'd never seen before, something between decision and fear. What you propose violates centuries of Concord military doctrine. Their doctrine is failing, Major Yoon pointed out. The Void advances on 16 fronts. You're losing this war. And getting us killed in the process, added Colonel Shin. Sung's upper eyes closed briefly. A gesture they'd learned indicated deep thought. If I help you, I become a traitor to the Concord. If you don't, Han said softly, we all lose everything. The commander seemed about to reply when the emergency alarms blared throughout the base. Red lights flashed along the corridors. The central display automatically shifted to defensive screens, showing multiple breaches. Impossible, Sung whispered, his color draining to pale blue. Our outer defenses were supposed to hold for another week. Major Yoon checked her tactical screen. The Void Dominion has broken through the outer defenses. They've adapted to your patterns again. She looked up grimly. They're inside the base perimeter. Han pulled her pulse rifle from its wall mount, checking the charge. Around her, the other officers did the same, their movements quick and practiced despite months of exhaustion. Looks like the Council will get their answer, Han said, slamming a fresh energy cell into her weapon. Whether they want it or not. Colonel, Shin activated the base-wide communications system. All human units, this is Shin. Forget the standard response protocols. Form into fire teams and use urban combat tactics. Pick your targets, conserve ammunition, protect your flanks. Han looked at Sung, who stood frozen in indecision. Commander, are you with us or against us? The alien's color stabilized into a determined purple. What do you need me to do? Get us access to the command systems, Han said. If we're going to fight our way, we need control over our own deployments. Sung hesitated only a moment before placing his hand on the security scanner. The Concord has existed for 10,000 years because it adapts, he said, as the system accepted his authorization. Perhaps it's time for our biggest adaptation yet. The bunker doors sealed as the first sounds of combat echoed down the corridors. Han sent her officers to their units with clear instructions. Survive, adapt, win. The revolution had begun. Whether it would succeed would depend on the next few hours. They're retreating. Lieutenant Kim's voice crackled over the comm as Han watched from the command center. His words came between heavy breaths, the sounds of weapons fire still echoing in the background. I repeat, the Void forces are falling back across all sectors. The command center erupted in restrained celebration. No cheers or shouts. These veterans had seen too many false victories, but smiles broke through the tension like sunshine through storm clouds. Han allowed herself a small nod of satisfaction as she studied the massive holographic display dominating the center of the room. Operation Wildcard had been in effect for just 3 weeks. 3 weeks since humans had taken control of their own combat operations. 3 weeks of throwing out the Concord's careful, predictable battle plans and embracing what humans did best: adaptation, improvisation, and controlled chaos. The holographic map showed it clearly. Red markers representing Void Dominion forces pulled back from positions they had held for months. Blue markers, human strike teams, pursued in seemingly random patterns that made no strategic sense according to conventional warfare. Send Team Delta around their eastern flank, Han ordered, and have Teams Foxtrot and Romeo pull back rather than pursue. The controllers relayed her commands. To a traditional military mind, the orders might seem contradictory. Attack on one front while retreating on another, where they held advantage. But contradiction was precisely the point. The enemy is adapting, cautioned Sung from his position beside her. The Concord commander's skin rippled with cautious blue. Once their overseer, he now openly supported the human-led initiative, providing crucial access to Concord technology and weapons systems. But more slowly than anticipated, Han nodded. The Void operates on pattern recognition. When they can't find patterns, they falter. She walked closer to the main display, studying the modified Concord technology, deployed in ways the aliens had never imagined. Human engineers had reconfigured shield generators to create localized gravity wells. Transport ships now functioned as massive electromagnetic pulse weapons. Medical nanites had been repurposed to disrupt the Void's hive mind communications. They I expected logic, Han said quietly. We gave them chaos. Sung moved beside her, his tall frame casting a slight shadow over the display. My people have fought the void for 3 centuries, he admitted. We lost ground every year because we were predictable. Humans have spent most of our history fighting each other, Han replied. We've learned that surprise is often more powerful than strength. A priority alert flashed across the command screens. Han felt the atmosphere in the room tighten as everyone recognized the incoming transmission codes. The Concord High Council, Sung whispered, his colors shifting to nervous purple. They rarely communicate directly with field operations. Han straightened her uniform jacket. Put them through. The tactical display flickered and transformed into the image of Councillor Moon, his elongated features set in what humans had learned to recognize as the Concord expression of extreme displeasure. 4 eyes blinked in asynchronous patterns, a sign of agitation. Captain Han, the councillor began without greeting, reports indicate your forces have abandoned standard combat protocols across 17 sectors. Han met his gaze steadily. That is correct, councillor. Furthermore, Moon continued, his voice translator unable to hide his disapproval, you have modified Concord technology without authorization, repositioned fleet assets against direct orders, and implemented tactical variations that have no basis in established military doctrine. The command center fell silent. Everyone knew what hung in the balance. If the Council decided to reassert control, they could remotely lock down every ship, every weapon, every life support system under their control. Your methods violate every principle of Concord warfare, Moon stated, his colors darkening further. Han took a deep breath before responding. She gestured to the tactical display visible behind Moon's transmission. Yet they're working, she countered simply. The councillor's eyes all blinked at once, a rare occurrence that Sung had once explained indicated surprise. That, Moon admitted reluctantly after a long pause, is why we haven't stopped you. Yet, Han allowed herself a small smile. The Void has lost more territory in 3 weeks than in the previous 6 months. Our casualties are down 60%. If results matter to the Concord, then I suggest you let us continue. Moon's colors shifted through various shades as he processed this challenge to thousands of years of Concord military tradition. The Council requires explanation. How can such a disorderly succeed where precision has failed? Han nodded to a nearby controller, who transferred tactical data to the Council's systems. The Void operates like a perfect machine, Counselor. It anticipates logical responses and counters them. Humans are introducing variables it cannot predict. Illogical variables, Moon noted, with what might have been disapproval or curiosity. Precisely, Han agreed. We call it throwing a wrench in the works. Sometimes the best way to defeat a machine is to make it malfunction by introducing something unexpected. Another alert sounded. Lieutenant Kim's voice came through again. Captain, we've broken through their secondary line. The path to their command node is open. Han looked back at Moon's image. Will you allow us to continue, Counselor? Or should we return to the failed tactics that were losing this war? Moon's colors stabilized into a steady blue that even humans could recognize as resignation. Proceed, Captain Han. The Council will observe your methods with interest. As the transmission ended, Sung turned to Han, his colors showing what they'd learned to recognize as amazement. In 10,000 years, I have never seen the Council admit they might be wrong. Han turned back to the tactical display, already planning the next unpredictable move. Then they're more adaptable than you thought. Maybe there's hope for your species after all. Around her, the human controllers smiled as they returned to their stations. For the first time since the war began, victory felt possible. Han stood before the reformed Concord Council, still wearing her battle-scarred uniform. She had refused the ceremonial clothes they offered. The burns and patches told the true story better than any fancy outfit could. The great chamber stretched high above, its crystal dome showing the stars beyond. 700 representatives from across the galaxy sat in rising tiers, their different forms and colors creating a living rainbow. In the center ring sat the High Council, the 12 oldest species who had formed the original Concord 10,000 years ago. Han felt small, but refused to show it. Behind her stood 20 human officers, the survivors of what they now called the Final Strike. 3 weeks ago, they had led the mission into the heart of the Void Dominion, targeting its neural hub. 200 humans and 300 Concord allies had gone in. 48 returned, but they had won. The Void, without its central command, had collapsed within days. The war was over. The neural hub mission had succeeded, though at terrible cost. General Han, began the chief counselor, a being of pure energy contained in a special field. The Concord acknowledges your species' contribution to our victory. Han didn't correct the title. Captain to General in 9 months. War had. A way of quick promotions. We wish to offer humanity full protectorate status, the counselor continued. Your world will receive our protection, technology sharing at appropriate levels, and limited representation in this chamber. A murmur ran through the gathered representatives. For a species that only months ago had been classified as primitive, this was an unprecedented offer. Han looked back at her officers. Major Kim nodded slightly. This was what they had discussed. No, Han said clearly, her voice amplified throughout the chamber.